The story begins with a group of explorers on a ship in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean. On the ship was a weather officer named David who reports on the weather. They were heading towards an island located in the middle of the ocean. The government had sent David there to observe the changing weather on the island. David had to stay there for about a year. After collecting weather data for a full year, he was supposed to return. David was given a year's worth of food and all the necessary supplies. After several days of travel, they finally reached the island. They landed on the island using a boat. This island was completely desolate, where not even a bird could be seen. On the island there was a lighthouse and a small house where David was to live. Previously, a weather officer named Robert used to live here. But his duty time was now over. He had lived alone on that island for a year, collecting weather data. Now David would stay here for a full year to collect weather data, and the old officer, Robert, would go back with the ship. But when the entire team visited the house, they were surprised because there was no trace of any human being there. Inside the room, all the old officer's belongings were scattered here and there. After this, the captain and David thought that maybe someone was in the lighthouse. Without wasting any time, the captain and David moved towards the lighthouse, and there they saw a strange sight. They saw that the entire lighthouse was surrounded by sharp, pointed wooden stakes, as if someone had deliberately closed it off so that no one could enter. After that, the captain and David knocked on the lighthouse gate many times, but there was no response from inside. Finally, they pushed the gate hard and went inside. Inside the lighthouse, they found a man named Gruner. When they asked Gruner about the old weather officer Robert, he replied that he was dead. He had gone towards the sea but never returned. Hearing Gruner's words, both David and the captain were shocked. After hearing this, the captain told David that he could still come back with them if he wanted. But David refused to go back. David thought that if he could give the government an accurate weather report for the island, he could get a hefty sum of money. After that, the captain gave him a gun for his own protection, and the captain told David, "This place doesn't look safe to me, take care of yourself." After that, leaving him there, they all went back, and they would return again after a year. After the captain left, David settled the house a bit, made it livable. After nightfall, he found a diary in a drawer, which belonged to the old weather officer Robert. That diary had a lot written about the island. Some things were written about a mysterious creature, but not everything was clear. Some lines were incomplete. David read each line carefully. The diary also had sketches of some strange animals. David couldn't understand why he had drawn such pictures. Maybe he was lonely and did it to pass the time. On one page of the diary, there was also a photo of the old officer's wife. David got tired of reading the diary and slowly fell asleep. The next morning, David started collecting weather data, but as soon as he reached the seashore, he stopped in his tracks. He saw that some stones were arranged strangely among the rocks, with shells placed between them in a strange pattern. David thought that perhaps Gruner had done all this. Thinking this, he got back to his work. During his work, when he looked towards the lighthouse with his binoculars, he saw another person with Gruner, but in the blink of an eye, that person disappeared. David tried to see him again, but then thought it was just his imagination. At night, David was busy with his work. Then there was a knock on the door. He thought it might be Gruner. David called out his name, but there was no answer. As David, holding a lamp, moved towards the door, he heard some strange sounds echoing in his ears which didn't sound human at all, and then he saw, from under the gate, the hand of some bizarre creature trying to come inside. That hand was not human at all. Seeing this, David was completely terrified. He immediately ran towards the basement and hid there. Within moments, that mysterious creature had entered the house. It was searching for David, hiding and seeking, and David started watching it from a small crack in the basement. Due to David's movement, the creature saw him. After that, the creature ran swiftly towards him to kill him and tried to grab him through the crack. So to save himself, David immediately picked up a knife and stabbed it in the creature's eye. That creature screamed and ran away, but it could come back anytime, and this confirmed in David's mind that whatever was written about the creature in the diary was true. Terrified, he couldn't sleep the whole night. The next morning, when David went out of the house, he saw some footprints in the sand that were not human at all. Those tracks led straight towards the sea and then ended. Now David understood everything, why Gruner had put sharp wooden stakes around the lighthouse. Now David knew that if he stayed in this house, those creatures could kill him anytime. Fearing for his life, David runs towards the lighthouse and shouts to Gruner, "Open the gate, I need to come inside." But Gruner doesn't let him in and says, "You should have gone back with the ship." David returns disappointed because Gruner didn't even want him near the lighthouse. He pours water on him to drive him away. Now David had to do something on his own. He boarded up every window of the house with wood. He made a barrier of sharp wooden stakes all around. He placed old papers and books outside the gate. Then he poured oil on them so that if the creature returned, he could scare it away with fire. But there was one thing that David didn't know yet, and he was about to find out that night. Fortunately, he found an old box inside the house. In that box was a gun and plenty of bullets. Seeing this gave him a glimmer of hope for survival. As the sun began to set, David's fear grew. Within moments, darkness enveloped everything around. David sat silently in a corner of the house with the gun in his hand. His heart was beating fast. Then he heard a strange sound, and when David peeked through the window towards the sea, he was utterly shocked. He saw not just one, but many of those same bizarre creatures emerging from the water and advancing towards him. Within moments, they all gathered and started trying to break down the door of the room. David immediately started firing his gun. Some of the creatures fell down dead. David thought that hearing the gunshots, they would get scared and run away, but seeing their companions die, they became even more enraged. Then David executed his plan and set fire to the papers and old books placed outside the gate. Seeing the fire, those creatures, scared, retreated back into the sea. But now that very fire had reached David's house. The door of the house caught fire and slowly began to spread because the whole house was made of wood. David immediately wrapped himself in a sheet, saved his life, and went outside, hiding behind a large stone near the lighthouse. While shooting the creatures, David's hand was also quite badly injured. Suddenly, a heavy rain started. The fire slowly began to die down, but even after the whole night's rain, by morning, David couldn't save his house. The entire house had burned down to almost ashes. Now, if David wanted to survive, he had to take shelter in the lighthouse. He picked up his rifle, hid among the stones near the lighthouse, and waited for Gruner to come out to fetch water. When Gruner came out of the lighthouse to get water, David followed him. But suddenly, a strange creature that was near Gruner attacked David. Somehow, David managed to subdue it. That creature was Gruner's protector. When he was about to shoot it, Gruner immediately stopped David and said, "Stop, it's my pet." David didn't fire, and taking advantage of the situation, he made a deal with Gruner. "If you want this creature to live, then let me stay in the lighthouse. Otherwise, I will kill it." After that, Gruner agreed because David had plenty of food and gunpowder. Before evening, both returned to the lighthouse with the remaining food, and both slept peacefully. The next morning, that creature was silently licking David's hand. When David woke up from sleep, he saw that due to the creature's licking, his hand was completely healed. Seeing this, David was amazed. David now wanted to know more about this creature from Gruner, and then wanted to present all this to the world because it was nothing short of magic. David thought that if they brought the secret of this creature to the world, both David and Gruner would earn a lot of money and fame. But Gruner didn't want any of this. He didn't want to go anywhere from this island. Gruner had no one left in this world. For him, this island was perfect, where he considered himself a king and the master of his own will. Because of this, he had written in many parts of the island, "Gruner is the king here," but David couldn't understand how this strange creature became Gruner's slave. So Gruner explained that once Gruner had saved its life, it had gotten trapped in his fishing net by mistake. At that time, this creature was small, and since that day it started living with Gruner. It began obeying his every command, but Gruner was a harsh man. He treated this creature very badly. Gruner would have physical relations with this creature every day. Gruner told that once this creature had attacked him, and in return, Gruner gave it such a punishment that after that punishment, the creature started considering itself Gruner's slave. And all of you must have understood why those creatures come out of the sea every night. They all come to rescue their companion from Gruner and take her back, but Gruner doesn't let that happen. Those creatures cannot attack in daylight because the sun's rays burn their skin. David didn't want to stay here anymore. He wanted to somehow save his life and leave the island. Well, evening began to fall, and Gruner told him to get ready with the gun because those creatures could attack anytime. They got ready to turn on the lighthouse light, and within moments, a large number of creatures emerged from the sea. They kept advancing towards the lighthouse. Gruner kept firing at them continuously, but David was completely terrified. He started moving inside the lighthouse. Despite Gruner's repeated requests, he just sat silently in a corner, and within moments, David fell unconscious. Gruner fought these creatures alone all night. The next morning, Gruner angrily splashed water on David's face to wake him up and said, "If you want to live, you will have to take their lives. Otherwise, you will be thrown out of the lighthouse. You will have to obey my every command. Bring water daily, do all the small and big chores of the lighthouse, and at night you will also have to do guard duty with me." Now David had no other option. Because of this, doing all this became his compulsion. David now started obeying Gruner's every command, but there was one thing that he didn't like at all: torturing that female creature physically in different ways every day. Night falls, both get ready for guard duty again, and once again those creatures emerge from the sea. But today David wasn't afraid. He started firing at the creatures, but today Gruner wasn't doing anything. He leaves David outside, closes the lighthouse gate, and sits silently inside so that David can learn for himself how to fight these creatures. Fighting like this, David gets through the night and morning arrives. In the morning, Gruner saw that David was sitting outside the lighthouse gate, drenched in blood. Now he had learned how to fight these creatures. Time passed like this. Fighting these creatures at night and handling Gruner's lighthouse chores during the day, this island had now become like a prison for him. He kept thinking all the time about when he would leave this place and breathe the air of freedom. Over time, David had developed a strange friendship with that female creature. David now started feeling bad for her. Now he understood how difficult it is to live alone, leaving your own people. Perhaps that creature also felt something similar. David also gave that creature a name, Anarius. Days passed like this, and then one day they noticed that the attacks from these creatures were gradually decreasing. David thought that maybe they go somewhere else in winter, or perhaps they had realized that fighting these two wouldn't achieve anything. But Gruner told him that was not the case at all. They will attack again, now they are increasing their numbers. A few more days passed like this. One night after dinner, Gruner and David started playing chess to pass the time. But right here, Gruner made a big mistake. They both got so engrossed in the game that they forgot to turn on the lighthouse lights. Taking advantage of the darkness, the creatures attacked them. David saw that the number of creatures was so high that even two people together couldn't fight for long, and this time they had no planning either. The gun bullets were almost finished. Somehow managing to escape, they reached the top of the lighthouse. But in the meantime, Gruner's leg was badly injured. The creatures had overwhelmed them today. Both thought that their death was certain today, but fortunately morning came. As the sun slowly rose, those creatures left the lighthouse and went back into the sea. After the harsh sunlight came out, Anarius tried to heal Gruner's wound, but by now David understood that they could not win this fight against these creatures. Bullets were also almost finished. They also didn't have enough food to last much longer. Luckily, the next day when David was wandering around outside the lighthouse, he saw a ship in the sea. He quickly went inside, got the flare gun and went to signal the ship. But Gruner stopped him because he didn't want David to leave from here. At that very moment, Anarius attacked Gruner. She wanted to save David from Gruner. Gruner didn't want to let anyone leave this island. This island was his own world where he lived like a king. He didn't want to let David go either. After living alone for so long, he now had someone to talk to, and if David went back on that ship, he would go there and tell everyone about Anarius and them. Therefore, David cannot leave from here. Slowly, that ship disappeared into the sea before David's eyes. Now he had nothing left to do. A few more days passed like this. Gruner was still treating both David and Anarius badly. But he especially bait Anarius, which David did not like at all. One day, David gave Anarius a small toy boat as a gift, which he had made from a fish bone. But when Anarius saw that boat, she took David to a corner of the island where there was a real boat kept. When David asked Gruner about this boat, he said yes, he already knew that there was a boat in this part of the island. Gruner said that some people had come to this island by boat to save their lives. But before morning, none of them survived. All were killed by these creatures. They were carrying ammunition on their ship, but due to a storm at sea, their ship sank near this island. Hearing all this, an idea came to David's mind. They had something like a diving suit. David said that if one of us wears that suit and goes to the part of the sea where that ship sank, maybe we can find some bullets or dynamite to make fighting these creatures easier. But Gruner refused to agree to this. However, David was ready to risk his life to do this. A few more days passed like this. A deep connection developed between David and Anarius. David had started liking her. Gruner secretly saw both of them romancing. Gruner felt that Anarius would take David away from him, so David had to be removed from the path. The next day, Gruner himself agreed to listen to David. He told David, "Fine, you will wear the suit and go down into the water and collect a lot of RDX from there. Then I will pull you up with the boat." But Gruner's real intention was something else. He wanted David to bring the boxes of dynamite kept under the sea back to the surface with his help, and then leave him alone in the sea so that the creatures would kill him. This way he would get the dynamite, and Anarius would become his slave again. Both of them got into the boat and reached the place where the ship was sunk in the water. David put on the diving suit and descended into the sea. After going down, David saw that the ship was completely destroyed, but luckily for him, he found some boxes of dynamite. But suddenly, some creatures appeared in front of him. Seeing the creatures, David panicked and fell down. That diving suit was so heavy that he couldn't even move, and David couldn't even signal to Gruner above. Gruner thought that perhaps the creatures had killed David, but actually they were just two small children. Somehow, David left his diving suit there and pulled himself up to the surface. They found some old boxes there that contained dynamite. After this, both of them got to work. They laid dynamite in 2 layers around the lighthouse so that when the next attack happened, they could eliminate the monsters all at once. A few months passed and the season of snowfall arrived, but once again those creatures disappeared. The attacks had suddenly stopped, as if the creatures had gotten news that a trap had been set for them. That's why they weren't attacking now. Gruner thought that perhaps Anarius had warned those creatures, because of which he started tormenting Anarius, but David stopped him. Finally, both made a new plan together. To leave the main gate of the lighthouse open so that as soon as those creatures came near, they could blow them all up with dynamite. David cleverly asked Anarius to scream from the top of the lighthouse. Hearing Anarius's voice, all the creatures became enraged. When the creatures saw that the main gate of the lighthouse was open, they thought it was a good opportunity to rescue Anarius, but in reality it was a trap for them. Within moments, those creatures started emerging from the sea. They advanced straight towards the main gate and attacked David as soon as they entered. David also showed courage and freed himself from the creature. As soon as all those creatures reached near the lighthouse, Gruner pressed the dynamite lever, but there was no blast. Actually, David had disconnected the connection, and Gruner had forgotten to reconnect it. David immediately ran upstairs and started connecting the dynamite wires. Meanwhile, those creatures were trying to climb the lighthouse, stopped only by Gruner alone. As soon as the connection was completed, David blew the first layer. Many creatures were destroyed in the blast, but still many monsters were ready to attack the lighthouse. Because of this, Gruner also blasted the second layer. Both of them were knocked unconscious in that powerful explosion. The next morning, when both regained consciousness, they saw that Anarius was not there. Dead creatures lay all around from the blast. Gruner was killing all those who were still alive in injured condition. Then David's eyes fell on a necklace hanging around the neck of one of them. Seeing that creature writhing in pain, David felt pity for it and realized his mistake. The creatures he had considered ferocious until now were just like humans. They just couldn't speak, but for Gruner all this was useless talk. After that day those creatures never attacked again, but every day cries could be heard from the seashore. David still didn't know how much damage they had done. How many families were broken, how many children lost their people, all because of one misunderstanding. The next day David saw some small children of those creatures in the sea, those who had lost their families. David made a circle of stones and placed that small toy boat in the middle of it so that Anarius would see it and return. David waited for many hours, but Anarius never returned. After waking up from sleep in the morning, David saw that Gruner was sleeping. Some old things were kept with Gruner. Among them was an old photograph, and as soon as David saw that photograph he was astonished. The girl whose photo he had seen in old Officer Robert's diary on the first day was none other than Gruner's wife, and in the photo, Gruner was standing with her. Actually, the weather officer Robert who had come a year ago was not dead. He had changed his identity. That is, Gruner is the weather officer Robert. He had just changed his name because he never wanted to leave this island now. Seeing all this, David also gave up hope that he would ever be able to leave this island. The next day in the evening, when David went to the seashore, he saw that the small boat placed in that circle was no longer there. But in that very place, he saw a small baby creature with that boat in its hands. David threw a burning piece of wood into the middle of that circle to show that his intention was not to fight and that he meant no harm to anyone. He wanted to be friends with them. Within moments, Anarius emerged from the sea waves, and behind her, the whole group of creatures also came out of the sea. But this time, no one attacked David because they too wanted peace now. Their intention was only to have a safe place for their children, but just then, Gruner arrived there with a gun in his hand. Gruner felt that if there was peace, how would he feel being above everyone? David tried to explain to him that these creatures don't want to fight, they want peace, but Gruner doesn't listen to anyone. He shouts at Anarius, "Go inside," but this was the first time that Anarius didn't obey him because she was no longer his servant. Seeing this, Gruner felt that his kingship on this island was over. Gruner started feeling weak from within because no one was obeying his commands anymore. Angrily, he took steps towards the lighthouse. David thought that perhaps Gruner would now understand that every living being wants freedom. No one wants to live as anyone's slave, but the ghost of kingship was not going to leave Gruner's head. As soon as he reached the lighthouse, he fired a flare from the signal gun which went straight and hit a creature's child. That child died instantly. All the creatures ran away in fear, and Anarius also lost all her trust in David. Furious with anger, David immediately ran towards the lighthouse to teach Gruner a lesson. David started fighting with him. "Why did you do this? These people only wanted peace." but Gruner had become so violent that he decided to kill David. Just as he was about to strike David with an iron rod in his hand, David called him by his real name and said, "Stop, Robert, you are not a killer." Hearing this, Gruner stopped immediately. Actually, Robert had never been such a person. After coming to this island, his mental health had deteriorated due to living alone. Loneliness, his wife's death, and deep depression, all these had made him what he was. He wasn't actually a killer, he was a good person. Gruner realized that these creatures never wanted to fight, they only wanted peace. Gruner had killed them only to show himself powerful, and now Gruner realized his mistake. That's why he surrendered himself in front of those creatures, and within moments they killed him. David locks himself inside the lighthouse. Time passes like this, and a year later, a government officer arrives on the island. A new weather officer is also with him. Now the new government officer had to do weather monitoring duty on this island. When the captain asks David about the previous officer, David also says the same thing, that he went towards the water but never returned. The new weather officer also thinks that David is Gruner. David did not correct this misunderstanding. He silently went to the balcony and stood without saying anything, because now he too didn't want to leave this island, just like Gruner. Meanwhile, Anarius was happy with her family. Now they had no fear of a man like Gruner. Now they could live freely both on the island and in the sea. With this, the story ends.